So today, as we begin our sits leading up to our Torah reading on Shabbat, we're reading from the book of Numbers from Parshat Korach. And Korach was, I hate to label him so early in this sit, but he was a very formative character in the book of Numbers who raised questions about power and about leadership. And so I've been taken lately with the work of Susan Beaumont, who is a wonderful guide and consultant who wrote a book, and don't worry, the sources are all coming in just a moment, but she wrote a book called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. And this is a book that I first learned about several years ago, and I've been thinking about her work in light of this Torah portion and the character of Korach. So Korach descends from the Levites, and he sees Moses and has a concern about Moses's power and raises this concern pretty immediately at the beginning of the Torah portion for this week. And so I'm thinking about Susan Beaumont's work in relation to not knowing, and thinking about Korach's certainty, about how certain Korach appears, at least to me, with his concerns, with his statements, later his questions also, but he has statements before questions, as he approaches Moses. And so I want to kind of look at the Torah portion through the lens of three different spiritual shifts that Susan talks about in her work, and kind of see this as an antidote maybe to the certainty that Korach feels. So thank you to Jordan for sharing the text sheet, and I'll be reading everything that's on this brief text sheet as well. So if you don't have access to that, not to worry. So I started off here with a translation of the opening of the Torah portion. For those of you who may be new to Everett Fox's translations of the Torah, he does amazingly close to the language translations. And in doing this, in preserving the very close reading of the Hebrew, he shines light on some grammatical irregularities, I guess I would say, in the text, but also things that unlock deep and beautiful meaning by keeping the translation very close to the original Hebrew. So this is how Everett Fox translates the beginning of our parsha. He says, "Now there betook himself Korach." What does it mean when someone betakes themselves, as it were? But this is how he is translating the opening of our parsha. Now, I won't go into the grammatical reasons. You're welcome to look at that later. But just suffice it to say for now that there isn't a direct object to this verb to take. Usually we take someone, we take something. And as you read the opening of the parsha, and many commentators have noted this, that it's not clear what Korach's taking. So there's a reflexive nature, perhaps, to the way this verb is being used. Now there betook himself Korach. So Korach was, I'm kind of picturing this as like getting carried away, right? Like he kind of took himself and allowed himself to get carried away. And there's something about this carrying away for me that feels like Korach was very certain. He was very sure of his questions, of what he was feeling, of his anger, of his observations that Moses had too much power. So I want to just bring this quote from, and these are all hyperlinked, so you can check it out, from something called The Epidemic with Certainty, a psychological kind of source on the web. And where it says certainty is an emotional state, To create a feeling of certainty, the brain must filter out more information than it processes. The more certain we feel, the more vulnerable we are to noticing only the evidence that supports our beliefs while ignoring or discounting contradictory evidence, known as the confirmation bias, I believe is the technical term. So when I think about this, I'm picturing Korach through this description, right? That maybe his brain, his heart, his soul are filtering out more information than he's able to take in because he has already determined what is true and real. And he's not able to take in kind of new stimuli that might lead him to a less certain place. So with that in mind, I want to share with you these 3 spiritual shifts that invite presence. Now, this is Susan Beaumont's language. I think she capitalizes the P because in the P here, the P for presence, she's seeing the divine. And she's really laying out kind of a map for how we as individuals, and also with her work by extension with organizations and institutions, how they might make a shift to invite presence. I think it's such a beautiful, beautiful image that evokes for me. So I've taken some of these spiritual shifts and just given you some headlines a little bit from the longer section in her book. What she says about moving from knowing to unknowing is that this is an interior act of suspension. We are not our thoughts. This is a wonderful tagline for meditation in general. We observe and suspend our thoughts in service to a better way of seeing. The italics are mine here, but I love that, right? Like, isn't this what we're doing when we take time to sit? Is that we're giving ourselves over to the possibility of a better way of seeing, not necessarily visually, right? But seeing, understanding, comprehension, right? It's such a beautiful phrase that she has shared with us here. Wonder is the ability to hold competing thoughts and values in tension, right? So when we sit, we're letting those things wash over us without trying to act on resolution, on resolving, on the certainty that Korach felt. The second spiritual shift is moving from advocating to attending. And she says at the end of her section on this, she says, when we set aside our advocacy, we free ourselves. I left a word out there. We free ourselves to attend to an emerging option. Again, italics are mine there, an emerging option. So sometimes we're so busy putting out into the world what we think is right and what we are sure about and how other people should be thinking or speaking or believing, that we aren't free to attend to what might emerge, what could unfold, right? And so meditation is a chance for us, again, to put the advocacy down for a minute and just open ourselves up. And I wonder when I look at the story of Korach, I wonder if he missed what could have emerged from his relationship with Moses, right? Because he was so busy putting information out into the world and not kind of maybe waiting to see what could unfold. And then the third one, from striving to surrender, let go to let come, right? So it's a great question to ask ourselves is, what do we need to let go of in this moment in order to let something else come, to let something else emerge? And this other phrase, which is reminiscent for me of Otto Scharmer's work from the Presencing Institute, she also discusses, is be led by our own emerging future. Like, what does that mean? That the path that we're being drawn towards or following is one that's based on what's emerging in front of us instead of what we're holding tightly to in our own certainty. So that's what she means by moving from striving to surrender. So with that, we're going to give ourselves a chance to do what we do when we sit. For some people, this may be your first time attending Jewish meditation today. Welcome. And for others, we have immersed ourselves in this practice, come back to it as a well. And Jordan, thank you. You can take the source sheet down. And these spiritual shifts may not be new to us, but they're something that we recommit to time and time again, moving from knowing to unknowing, moving from advocating to attending, and moving from striving to surrender. So maybe there's one of those shifts that you want to hone in on, right? Using our inhale to take something in and using our exhale to release. And you might play with identifying the from and to with different expressions of your breath. You could try inhaling knowing and exhaling unknowing, right? Or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe you want to take in the unknowing aspects of this world that we live in, and you want to let go or exhale that place of certainty, the place of knowing, or advocating, or striving. So we're going to sit for about 12 minutes, and then we'll come back together for the conclusion of our sit. As we return to our communal space together, from the interior to moving our eyes to take in the individuals who are part of this sit today, we hold with us the moving from knowing to unknowing, from advocating to attending, from striving to surrender, in order to let go and let come.
Thank you, Susan. I want to encourage you to stay with us if you can after the top of the hour for some reflecting and Q&A. This today about this wonderful teaching Susan offered. And before that, we're going to have a chance for those who are reciting Mourner's Kaddish today to do so. We welcome you if you want to put the name of anyone you were holding in heart or mind in the chat as we recite Kaddish together. And Jordan has helpfully put the text of the Kaddish on the screen. And if you want to unmute, you are welcome to do so. And join me in reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash, Shmei Rabbi,
Amen.
v'alma divrach chirutei, v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach v'alam v'almei almayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yit'alal shmei v'kudsha brichu me'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mamav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru amen.
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 Thank you. So if you need to leave us, we wish you tzitchem l'shalom, farewell, and be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. And if you're able to stick around, we're glad for that. And so we'll invite Susan to come back. Here we go, back up on the stage. There we go. And Susan, thank you so much for that teaching and the idea of Korach as certainty and the inability or developing the capacity in opposite to that of living with that uncertainty. I thought was really beautiful. I thought about I teach Korach a lot as in the context of the Mishnah that talks about machloket l'shem shamayim, a conflict that is for the sake of an argument that's for the sake of heaven. And Korach, of course, is listed as the example of an argument that's not for the sake of heaven. And one of the commentaries on that talks about that, there are those disagreements that we have that we're really striving to arrive at the truth, and there are those that are really just about achieving power. And that Korach seemed to be, at least in this construence, more in that, more about that. So I thought that, to me, that resonated with what you were talking about. We're living through such a time of rapid shift and destabilization of so many things that we may have thought we were taking for granted, and maybe on just about every level. And so I just think this teaching of living with uncertainty is so powerful. We've gotten a bunch of questions. Wow, a lot of questions coming in already. So I'm not even going to go to a question. I'm going to go right to Lauren's question here about because you distinguish between advocating, right, and accompanying, I believe, right, And so don't we have an obligation to advocate for ourselves, our people, and the needy? Yeah, it's a great question, Lauren. And so I wonder, Susan, how do you, how do you respond to that one?
Sure. There's a lot of hot button topics in this teaching, right? Because
Yeah,
yeah,
a
so a
bunch of
lot,
them.
I mean hot button like in the most positive way, right? Like anytime you have a binary of moving, or if you're thinking of polarities, this may be a more helpful way. There's that sense of like, wow, if I go too far in this direction, am I ignoring or am I not living up to an obligation that I have? So I want to tell us a quick story. I mentioned this the last time I taught, but this is really coming up for me about the advocating and attending. I was recently, as many of you know, I work as a visiting rabbi at many different congregations. So I was recently at one of the congregations, and someone came to the congregation for Shabbat services, and their daughter was missing. And they sent a message to me that they wanted me to pray for her. And I did so, from the pulpit. And of course, after the service, went up to them to just just be with them, right? To like see what emerged. Did they want a hug? Did they want me to say something? Did they want me to just stand there? Did they need help with concrete information? And so I attended to them, right? Some members of the community came forward, and sometimes it's very difficult to just attend and to read the signs of what the person in front of you needs. And they really came in as advocates. Does the police know she's missing? Have you considered this resource? And they actually, that's not why they came to the synagogue. They didn't come because they needed an advocate. We might think they need an advocate, but they came just so that someone would attend. So it's not that we don't need advocacy in our society, but so much of what I see around us is we come in as advocates before we attend to what and whom is in front of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great distinction and it applies in so many different ways. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can think it through, but whether you're talking about, obviously there's things related to political advocacy or Jewish advocacy, etc., right? But you're talking also in a very um, mundane sort of way, just even in our regular interactions, right? How do we attend to everything that's going on before we offer, whatever kind of advice or, springing into action? It feels like it's related to the practice that Mark teaches of hitlamdut, self-awareness, and then bechira, choosing, right, and then returning to our intention, what we teach in awareness and action, or what we're teaching in the Shema course right now also. Yeah, really, really beautiful. Um, Rana's question looks like it was a similar one. Um, I wonder about Barbara's question here. Do you see a difference between unknowing and not knowing? That's
Mm.
interesting.
I, I think it's beautiful because the practice of unknowing, as I understand it. In other words, I can see myself grasping or being certain, and now I have to go back to what some of us might identify as a beginner's mind, right? So how do I say, whoa, wait a minute here. I'm coming at this all from a place of I'm sure, I know, it's an intellectual empirical knowledge, and to say I'm going to go back to a place of curiosity. I don't mean go back in a negative way. I'm like in a tshuva way, in a returning way of like, can I get back to a place where I actually I'm not sure. So I think the practice of unknowing, we're probably doing well, we have the opportunity to do all the time because this is aspirational. It's not a for sure, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. There's also this question Ruth had, and I want to try to understand a little better. I wonder if we embedded in the what we know is what we think we know. Right. So what we know is what we think we know, releasing assumptions to make room for information and learning. That's my own need for clarification versus assumption. So it sounds like you're talking about something again. And it's subtle what you're talking about, right? It's not quite categorical. It feels, but it's an orientation or a kind of an orientation towards knowledge or what we think of as knowledge.
Mm. Because it's not bad to know things, right? We're not saying we don't want to throw that out. But I think the question of making room is a really big question with that.
Hmm. Hmm. Makes me think of the drashot about Korach's name, Korach like Kerach, like ice, right? That he sort of chills, solidifies things. But there's all sorts of the rabbis do a whole number on Korach. In some ways, they're a little
Yeah.
unfair to Korach, but but yeah,
Yes,
we project a lot of stuff onto Korach.
yes, I think you're thinking of the expansion of ice in this case of the room also, right? Like that as the water expands and freezes into ice, there's less space for anything else in that container or.
Yeah, yeah, right. Um, yes, and and you can't enter the. Friend of mine was just telling me he has a swimming pool, and and this is the first spring that they're in the pool. They just moved into this house, and I said, "Oh, so you must have put all the water." He's like, "Actually, no, you leave the water in over the winter." I was like, "How's that work?" Because that seems like it would, and I was just imagining, and it fills up the space, whatever. I guess it fills it up over. I don't know the pool physics here, but what I most think of is you can't enter into the space, right? When it's solid, there's no room to enter, as opposed to when it's liquid, you can be in it, and that seems also related here.
Hmm.
Interesting. It's a great point here. Uh, Thinking about how Googling has become an automatic response to not knowing, right? If I don't know something, I'm just going to Google it, right? And rather than sitting with the not knowing, um, you know, yeah,
Yes. I have felt that as well in my own social circles. It's like, can't we just let something be not known?
yeah.
And let's see what happens with that. Yeah.
My niece is coming to visit us today from Israel, and she's 30 years old. I mean, she has two little kids, but her father, my brother, is updating me on, they're flying over this city, over this city. They're going to touch down in 10 seconds. And I said, Dan, this is kind of the epitome of helicopter parenting right now. Actually, it's airplane parenting. Like, you can let it go. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's a big
someone
girl.
asked me over the last couple of days, how did we plan teenage parties without being able to text each other, right? And so it's like we figured it out. We're in high school and college.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Um, yeah, that's great. Um, I'm curious for folks here also. Yeah, how do you experience that? This feels like a cultural move towards just this discomfort with not knowing and this desire to be more certain. The illusion of certainty, maybe, and uh, and discomfort with that illusion. Um, yeah, it really feels like a lot of what's here.
I think the other thing for me, Josh, is that Susan Beaumont's work is all really focused on times of liminality, when the path forward is not clear. And these are times that since the pandemic and even before, they're just becoming more and more frequent, right? We're talking about that. Like, so the stance or the approach that we take to such rapid change and uncertainty and liminal times, the skill set's literally different, is
Mm.
what she's talking about and
Mhm.
teaching about. Someone had raised before earlier in the chat the question of, what is advocacy? And Susan Beaumont has her own take on this, but it is difficult to advocate during liminal times. And that doesn't mean we don't have a sense of morality or what is in line with how we understand the divine, how we might behave towards each other and behave in society. But those really strong positions that we're going to come in and say this is the way things are is really becoming much more, she would say, ineffective, or at a minimum difficult during these times.
Mhm. Mhm. You had started with the language, the ambiguous language at the beginning of the parsha, the Yikach Korach, right, where there's no direct object. What is he taking? I think you were talking about just even the gesture of taking, of holding, right? There's a grasping that's sort of part of that. Um, and it's interesting, like, I'm thinking of, there's an essay by, it is the book, The Burnt Book by Mark Alan Weckman. I'll put his name in put it in the
Thank you.
chat. So yeah, you can look him up. But talking about that idolatry, that in a certain sense, that the tradition understands idolatry as wanting to have certainty about the location and identity, position and substance of God, of the divine, and that what the Torah is pretty emphatic about is that that's unknowable. And so that there's almost, in what you're saying, there's there's a gesture of that, expression of that kind of reaching towards solidity, that firm knowledge that is the illusion presented by idolatry, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's echoing in the chat as well, Josh, as people are talking about, the device offers a certainty, right, in the social setting. And so it's just easy. It's very beguiling to go there, to want that.
There's our next provocative topic. Is phone use idolatry? Not only does it need a Surgeon General's warning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. Thank you. This is a very rich chat here. A lot of good comments about learning and teaching and the need for wonder. We haven't even mentioned Heschel. Wonder, Heschel. All right, Heschel's been mentioned. Good. Okay.
Yes.
Uh, Here we go. All right. Well, thank you. Susan, thank you as always for your teaching and for leading us in this practice together today. And thanks everybody for being here. Mark, hopefully is going to be feeling better, and I hope is back tomorrow. I guess there's a chance I or somebody else may be here if he's not. But hopefully he's feeling better. And so thank you, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you.